Hello and welcome to Tap That MTG, the show where we tell you everything we know about Magic the Gathering that is sometimes wrong, but fun to talk about. Today we are bringing you, I'm Lesley.
And I'm Shawna.
I always forget to introduce us. Sean always has to remind me. Today we are bringing you another video in our Commander 2020 deep dive series.
Hmm.
We are talking about Symbiotic Swarm today. So that's an exciting deck. Both Sean and I are very excited about it. Just so you know what we're doing, we are going to break this deck down for you, talk to you about each of the cards that's in it. We're going to compare it to a typical commander formula.
Hmm.
Um, it's our preferred formula, not necessarily the only formula, but it is a formula that we have showcased in how to create your own homebrew deck.
Right on.
So if you want to check that out, you can definitely do that. Um, so before we get started, we should, I guess, find out what this deck does. So Shauna, what does this deck do?
Okay, so the Symbiotic Swarm deck, its main purpose is to use your graveyard to give abilities to your commander. So death touch,
Mhm.
flying, all those sorts of things. And then hopefully you can bring those creatures back as well from the graveyard, including your commander, because then you won't have to pay for him again. So we're going to talk about some graveyard cards, some crazy shenanigans as far as having creatures with double strike and things like that, so that our commander has access to those abilities.
Yay.
Yeah.
And
He
there's new types of counters in this one too, isn't there?
Yes, so you can get counters onto your creatures. So a death touch counter or vigilance counter or those sorts of things. You can get those on some of the new creatures.
Oh.
New cards in general can do that for you. Um, so your this commander is called Catheral Aspect Warper. It is a nightmare insect, which is kind of cool. And it's for two, a white, a black, and a green. So I forget what that's called. A Naya, I think maybe. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, put a flying counter on any creature you control if a creature card in your graveyard has flying. Repeat this process for first strike, double strike, death touch, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, and vigilance. Then put a 1/1 counter on Catheral for each counter put on a creature this way. So you can put it on your other creatures, you can put it on your commander, wherever you want, and it's going to grow, which is very exciting. It's
I love that it's not just you pick one of those, you repeat the process
Yeah,
for each of those.
yeah, as many as you want.
That's crazy.
Hooray,
That's a
hooray.
crazy enter the battlefield effect.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and the deck breakdown, it's fairly, it's a little high, maybe, I would say, possibly. Well, what do you think, Leslie? Do you think it's a little high?
Well, I think
Mana
as
curve?
far as deck breakdown goes, you're talking about the mana curve.
Yeah,
Are we going into deck breakdown?
I guess
Okay.
we are.
Yeah, awesome. So deck breakdown, mana curve wise, we have there's a lot of three, but if you look at five, six, seven,
Hmm.
8, and 9 mana cost, there is a lot of big
Yeah,
creatures. However, the whole point of this deck is to be able to bring things back from your graveyard and play them or put them in, like play them for free or put them into your hand. So hopefully you won't have to pay the mana cost of some of those big creatures, or you'll be able to steal the abilities from those creatures that
yeah,
are in your graveyard that are good and big and beefy to make your maybe small aerial flyer into this gigantic, crazy death touch, vigilance, lifelink, flying. I mean, it has a lot of those things anyway. But
yeah.
so yeah, I think it is a fairly high mana curve. It'll be interesting to play this deck. So this is the
Hmm.
one that I think is the hardest to know how it's going to
Yes,
unfold and how it will work
totally
as
agree.
far as like it's not just straightforward this deck. Um for colors, we have 14 multicolor, 15 white, 13 black, 14 green, and 6 colorless. Most of the decks are fairly even across the board for all the colors that are in their
Yeah.
decks. This one isn't changing at all in that aspect. Um, it is, if you look at the creature breakdown, it is fairly creature heavy. There
For
are
obvious reasons.
35
Yep.
creatures, which is, I think, the highest so far. Enchantments are 30, or sorry, enchantments are 6, sorcery 7. There's one planeswalker, 7 artifacts, which are mostly just your typical artifacts that you've seen in Commander, and 5 instants. There is 38 lands in this deck,
Mm-hmm.
so the land is definitely higher than it needs to be. But considering our mana curve, you might not want to cut too many of
Yep.
those lands out either. So it'll be interesting to see how this shapes up.
Yeah, and
Let's
like you
dive.
said, Lesley, it's going to be weird to figure out, okay, do I actually just let this card go to the graveyard or do I play this card? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's going to be some of that cycling and that sort of thing happening that,
Yeah.
yeah, you have to think
It's
about.
going to be a thinking deck. It's not just a typical, I'm going to play all my creatures and go wide. You're going to have to make some choices
Mm-hmm.
with the counters you use. You're going to have to make some choices with what you bring back from your
Yep.
graveyard. And so this is a great deck for those that want something a little more complicated
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit. Um, it is
Thinking,
a very powerful deck as well. But yeah, it's going to make you think for sure.
which is what I like about Magic. Woohoo!
Yeah, exactly. So, what's the first category we're talking about?
So, just a reminder, we're going through all of these decks based on how Leslie's video from a few weeks ago was about a formula that you could build your own commander deck. So, we're going through each of these decks with that formula in mind. So the first thing, the first section, the ramp mana generator, the formula says 15, and in this deck there is only about 9. So it's a little low on that. We'll talk about that later on. But the first card we've got
Which
here
is
is,
interesting.
oh,
Sorry, before you do
yeah,
the first card,
yeah,
it's interesting because we just talked about the mana curve on this deck
yeah,
and
exactly.
how high it is,
Yeah,
but yet there's not a lot of mana ramp or mana generating. So that just speaks again to the fact that this is not a deck that you are intended to play all your cards with the mana. You're intended to bring them back.
yeah.
So, and
So Cartographer's Hawk, very pretty card for 1 and a white. It's a 2/1 flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you, return it to its owner's hand. If you do, you may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library.
mhm.
Yeah, so that's kind of nice.
Mhm.
Flyer and
I
a
love
land.
Yeah, I love that it has the flying too, because then if that is in your graveyard, you can
Hmm.
steal the flying. So
Yep.
Karametra's God of Harvest, I like that they put the Theros Beyond Death gods, or at least one of them, into this
Hmm.
deck. It's a 5 mana cost creature. It's 6/7. It is indestructible, and as long as your devotion to green and white is less than 7, it's not a creature. However, whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains card, put that onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So really good ramp here
Hmm.
because it's indestructible. It's hard to get rid of,
Yep.
and so that kind of makes up for not having as much ramp, as well as if it does end up in your graveyard because it's killed or because you've
Yeah.
put the top cards of your library into your graveyard, you can steal the indestructible. So
Hmm.
that's a really great
Very,
dual purpose there.
very. Sakura Tribe Elder is kind of a commander staple for 1 and a green. It's a 1/1 snake shaman, and sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library.
Mm-hmm. And Sager's Wayfinder, a fairly basic card, just 2 mana, 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You can put a land card from among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. I
Hmm.
love that this one then puts things into your
Yep.
graveyard, which then you can use. So it's a really good option for this deck.
Yep. Cultivate for 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards. Put one on the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand. Then shuffle your library. So you want to play that where you
Commander
can put both of
staple.
those lands out.
Yeah. Another commander staple. This is pretty basic. Arcane Signet
Hmm.
2 adds 1 mana of any color for your commander's color
Yep.
identity. So
Commander Sphere for 3. Add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity and sacrifice and draw a card. So that's really nice.
We sound really bored while we're saying these cards. We're not. We've just, when you do this many videos, it's like, oh, this card
This card
again.
again.
So sorry, we know some of you are, this is your first video, so we'll be more
Sorry.
exuberant. Soul Ring. For 1, it adds 2 colorless mana.
Woohoo!
Lovely little commander staple in Soul Ring.
People keep talking about banning banning that card.
Oh,
They don't like it. Bonder's Ornament. We love the art on this card. It's so pretty, and it's going to be a new commander staple for sure. It is for 3. It is an artifact that you can add 1 mana of any color, and you can pay for it and tap it, so you don't have to sacrifice it. And each player who controls a permanent named Bonder's Ornament draws a card, which is really nice. You don't have to sacrifice it, so you can do that over and over again.
Mm-hmm. So then we move into removal. So removal in this deck is also very interesting. There's a lot of board wipes in this removal category, which benefits you because it's okay if you put your creatures in the graveyard, because then you can use their abilities. So you don't have to be worried about that. Whereas normally you would worry about putting too many board wipes into your deck. So our preferred formula says let's put 15 in, and we found 15 that we felt would go into this category, so that works really well. The first one is Obscuring Haze. It is a new one. It costs 2 and a green. It's an instant, and if you control a commander, you can cast this one without paying its mana cost, which is fantastic. And you can prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. So the beautiful thing about this card is that because you're giving all of your creatures things like deathtouch and indestructible and lifelink and all of that, you play this, and now suddenly their creatures can't do damage, but when you've blocked, your creatures can. So you're going to want to play this card during combat, of course. Instants are always combat tricks.
And for free, hopefully.
Probably after blockers are declared, and then all of a sudden none of their stuff does damage and your stuff does, and you can remove a bunch of things all at once.
It's very sweet. And you did it for free. Woohoo!
Free!
Predatory Impetus for 4 and a green. It's an enchantment that the enchanted creature gets +3/+3 and must be blocked if able and is goaded. So again, you put that onto your opponent's creature, and it has to swing at anyone except you, and it's bigger, so you're going to be removing creatures for sure, because they're going to want to block that.
Yep. And another impetus in this deck, which is in all of the impetuses are in all of the decks. So this has black in it. So of course, Parasitic Impetus made it in 2 and a green. Beautiful artwork on this card. It is an enchantment. Again, it has goad, so you're going to put this on your opponent's creature. It does get +2/+2, but it can't attack you. And it has to attack each combat if able, so they can't choose to just not attack anybody. So it's going to start some wars around the table, and you gain 2 life, and they lose 2 life. So, nothing wrong with that.
No, definitely not. The next one is the Martial Impetus for 2 and a white. I don't think we've seen this one yet. It's, again, enchantment aura that your enchanted creature gets their enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and it is goaded. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, each other creature that's attacking one of your opponents gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So you're giving him a bonus, but it's not going to come at you anyways, so that's okay.
Yeah. You can deal with him later.
Get rid of exactly.
So this deck also has some great cards that are from our past Magic releases, and one of them that I love is Angel of Finality. It's a 3/4 flyer for 4, and Angel of Finality enters the battlefield. You get to exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So if they happen to be playing a graveyard shenanigan deck, you can say, no, that's my job, and you can exile their graveyard. I would not recommend using this on your own graveyard.
No, please don't.
No.
Uh, Cataclysmic Gear Hulk. It is from Kaladesh, my favorite set, and it's for 3 and
Mm-hmm.
2 white, an artifact creature construct that has vigilance, 4/5, so it's a good powerhouse. But when it enters the battlefield, each player chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents he or she controls, then sacrifices the rest. So it's a big cataclysm. You're going to want to make sure you play this when you can keep one of each of those things, and a little bit of board wipe for you, but that's okay because you're going to put something really great in your graveyard. It lets you control what's going into your graveyard, which is really
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Yeah, keep some stuff on the battlefield
Mm-hmm.
that you can then put counters on.
Yep.
So Cal Captain is a commander card, 3 and 2 white for a 5/5 vigilance. And when it becomes monstrous, you get to exile all artifacts and enchantments. So, of course, this is commander. There is lots of artifacts,
Yep.
lots of enchantments. There's even artifact decks out there. I can think of a few people that would hate it if I played this card.
Including
Um,
you.
yeah.
Kitty cat.
Maybe if I was playing my kitty cat deck. So it does have monstrosity 3, which means that if it's monstrous, you get to put 3/1/1 counters on it. It costs 5 and 2 white to
To
make
do
it
that.
monstrous.
Mm-hmm.
This one is great because it removes the does the removal, but it can become a big creature later. And if it
Mm-hmm.
is in your graveyard, you can copy vigilance. So that
Mm-hmm.
is one of the copyable things. Monstrosity is not.
Right. Sunblessed Angel for 4 and 2 white. It is a 4/5 flying angel, of course. When it enters the battlefield, destroy all tapped creatures. So, yeah, they just swung at you. Well, they're going to pay for that. You're blasting everything with your angel. And it's a flyer, so if it's in your graveyard, you've got flying.
Yeah. Especially if you have this guy in your graveyard, Archon of Valor's Reach. I love this card.
So
It's from
cool.
Battle Bond. 4 and a green and a white. So it is pretty expensive. It's one of those expensive
Mm-hmm.
cards. It's a 5/6, but it has flying, vigilance, and trample, all three of them copyable abilities by this commander.
Yep.
As Archon of Valor enters the battlefield, you also get to choose an artifact, enchantment, instant sorcery, or planeswalker, and players can't cast spells of those chosen types. So it allows you a little bit of control, which is why we put it in the removal category. It basically removes a certain type of card from the game.
Mm-hmm.
So forever. So
While it's out
until
there.
this is, it
Yep.
doesn't say, yeah, I guess until this card is gone.
Yep.
So it's not even just until the end of turn or until your next turn. It's like, sorry, all of your instants that you keep casting to try and get rid of my creatures or your sorceries, bye bye.
Or that other deck that we talked about the other
Yeah,
day, where it's
which is
all
all
about
instants.
instances.
Oh,
Sorry. No.
when we go head to head with certain people, perhaps I want this deck.
Yes, exactly. Acidic Slime for 3 and 2 green. It's a 2/2 Death Toucher. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. So that is definitely one you're going to want to use and then let it die, let it be in your graveyard because it's going to take something out with it. And then
Yeah.
everything's going to have Death Touch, which is really nice. Well, not everything, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever you put Death Touch counter on.
Something you put a counter on.
Yep.
Everything. Uh, Dune Blast. 4 and a white and a black and a green. So it's, again, pretty expensive card, but you get to choose up to one creature and destroy the rest. So perhaps you keep your thing that you've already added a bunch of counters to that has flying and can be big and beefy and destroy everything else. I will remind you again that your commander, you want to enter the battlefield again. So I wouldn't recommend saving your commander. I would recommend saving something that is going to benefit from your commander coming into the battlefield again, and then letting your commander go to your graveyard. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to pay the commander tax. You want to bring it back from your graveyard. So
Yep.
we will talk about cards that bring things back from your graveyard a little bit later.
Alrighty. And then the next we have is Dee Spark for 1 white and 1 black. It's an instant that exile target permanent with converted mana cost 4 or greater. It's just a great way to get rid of their big guy.
Yeah, definitely. And then Abzan Charm. I did put this
Abzan.
in Abzan.
That's the colors.
That's the three colors that we're talking about. Uh, this one I put in removal only because the very first thing is exile target creature with power 3 or greater, but it also is card draw, could go in that category. And it also has counter possibilities. So because this deck has a lot of counter shenanigans going on with
Hmm.
it as well, you might want to do that. All three of those choices are solid choices for this deck.
Right. Death Sprout for 1, a 2 black, and a green. It is an instant where destroy target creature, search your library for basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tap. So it's also mana ramp for you.
Yeah. And Blood Curdle, this has been in a few of the decks. All the decks that have black for Commander have this card. Blood Curdle, destroy target creature, put a menace counter on a creature that you control. So again, I love that this has a counter, a menace counter
Mm-hmm.
associated with it, which is a different type of counter. Um, another thing I never thought of that maybe we'll talk about in tweaks because we didn't talk about it when we were talking about tweaks is perhaps we need to proliferate this deck. Just say it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Adding counters, right?
Yeah,
It does change what the deck does, but
yeah. True.
anyway,
True.
we'll talk about that at the end of this video.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
And the next we have the next section is card draw or tutors. So getting that card draw happening. The first, so the formula says 13, and the deck only has 3. So not sure about that yet. But the first one is a Ajani Unyielding. It's a 4 loyalty planeswalker for 4 and a green and a white. And its +2 is reveal the top 3 cards of your library. Put all non-land permanent cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it is very strong that way. And its -2 is exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. You don't want to exile your own creatures though. -9, put 5 +1 counters on each creature you control and 5 loyalty counters on each other planeswalker you control. So that's where Leslie's talking about that proliferate, right? We might want that.
So Harmonize is another card draw. Draw 3 cards. It's pretty basic, pretty simple. I think, as was said, you don't necessarily want a ton of card draw in this deck. You want to bring things back from your graveyard rather than have them in your hand, which is why there's only 3. But draw 3 cards is a decent possibility. Yeah.
Grizzly Salvage for a black and a green. Instant, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature or land card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. So there's where it's putting that stuff into your graveyard for you.
All right. Our next category is high impact creature / cards. So not all of these are high impact creatures. Some of them are just cards that do a fairly decent thing for this deck. Formula says let's have 12. Our deck has 15 that we identified as fairly high impact. The first of which is Tayam, Luminous Enigma. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it. Then you can pay 3 to remove 3 counters from among creatures you control, any type of counters. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, then return a permanent card with a converted mana cost of 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yeah.
So you get to return things from your graveyard. It is converted mana cost 3 or less, but you're getting additional counters. You're able to put things into your graveyard by removing 3 counters from things. So again, this is perfect synergy for this card. Of course, it came out with this deck, so it might have been made for that.
It might have.
You get the partners again.
Yeah, so here is one that costs 3 for it's Nakara Lair Scavenger for 2 and a black, a legendary human cleric, a 2/2, and it partners with Yannick Scavenging Sentinel, and it has menace, and whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you draw a card and you lose a life. So there's a little bit of card draw there. And it pairs with Yannick, Scavenging Sentinel, which is a 3/3 hyena beast. So you can imagine what that's going to do. It has vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield, exile another creature you control until Yannick leaves the battlefield. When you do, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures, where X is the exiled creature's power. So a lot of thinking going on there with those cards. The partner is where you get to go and search for the other card and put it in your hand. So you're going to want to be able to play both of those if you can. But if not, it's next turn is fine too. But just keeping in mind how that's going to work together, and you want things to leave the battlefield. Then you can draw a card. Like, it's just, yeah. It's a thinking deck, let's just say. Again.
Yeah. So the next card is an interesting one, Selective Adaptation. It's 4 and 2 green for a sorcery. So first you're going to reveal the top 7 cards of your library, period. Then you choose from among them a card with flying, a card with first strike, and so on for double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, and vigilance. So for each of those, you're going to choose a card out of those 7. Probably you'll have all 7 cards that you're choosing. And then you put one of the chosen cards onto the battlefield, the other chosen cards into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. You're probably not going to get anything into your graveyard at that point because you're going to have likely everything in there. But if it happens to be an instant or a sorcery, or those things are going to go into your graveyard, obviously. But this is just a great card to get things into your hand. It could have gone in the card draw, but really it is fairly high impact card, so that's why we put it here.
Yeah, very much so. It's huge. A Croma Angel of Wrath for 5 and 3 white. An angel that has flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black and from red. So, yeah.
Enough said.
Yeah, 6/6. And again, if when she dies or if she's in your graveyard, like, who cares? You've got all access to all that stuff, which is awesome.
Oh gosh, and she's going to be hard to cast, so she's probably better to be in your graveyard and bring her back.
Bring her back later on. Yep.
Majestic Myriarch. Thank you. Some words you just can't say, right? It is a chimera for 4 and a green, and it has no power and toughness. So let's find out what its power and toughness are. Majestic Myriarch's power and toughness are each equal to twice the number of creatures you control. So first of all, that's great. At the beginning of each combat, this is the key synergy in this card. If you control a creature with flying, then Majestic Myriarch gains flying until the end of turn. The same is true for first strike, double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, and vigilance. So essentially, if you're using your commander right and distributing lots of counters all over the battlefield onto all your creatures, Majestic Myriarch is just going to keep getting bigger because its power and toughness are equal to double the number of creatures you have, including itself, and it's going to have all those abilities because you don't even have to put counters on it.
No.
Like, keep this card if you have a choice to keep a card.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It was really strong when it was out in Hour of Devastation. So, yeah, make sure you keep that card out for sure. It's such a strong card. Really fun to play with. And Odric Lunic Marshal is a really fun card to play with as well because he is similar. He is for 3 and a white, a legendary human soldier, a 3/3. At the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn if a creature you control has first strike. The same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance. So yeah, he doesn't have that, but he's giving everybody that. So once you have one of them or 2 or 3 or 4, You're going to have them all.
And then everything just has everything. This
Mm-hmm.
is like as close to a sliver deck as you can get.
Yeah.
Um, so Zetelpa Primal Dawn, so annoying this card. It is
Mm-hmm.
an 8 mana cost card, so it's going to be hard to cast, and it should be. It has flying, double strike, vigilance, trample, and indestructible. Doesn't matter if it ends up in your graveyard because you can steal those from it later.
Yep. Then we have a little Cairn Wanderer for 4 and a black, a little 4/4 changeling. So this card is every creature type. That's what changeling means. And as long as a creature card with flying is in a graveyard, Cairn Wanderer has flying. The same is true for fear, first strike, double strike, death touch, haste, land walk, lifelink, protection, reach, trample, shroud, and vigilance. So he's just a little crazy thing that's going to be really difficult to get rid of once it gets out there.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully everything on your board has indestructible and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Soul Flare. This one has Delve. So basically what Delve means is that each card you exile from your graveyard while casting this creature pays for one of the colorless mana
Mm-hmm.
in this. So potentially you can exile 4 cards from your graveyard, and then this will cost 2, which is outstanding. You're going to have tons of cards in your graveyard. It's a 4/4 for 2. If a creature card with flying was exiled, Soul Flare has flying. The same is true for all of the list. I'm not going to go through them. Um, so
Agreed.
basically, you get to choose what you do. What I would recommend is just picking one creature that has an ability that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, we talked about some of those cards going into your graveyard that aren't necessarily creatures with abilities. You want to leave those in your graveyard, exile your land, exile your enchantments that you
Mm-hmm.
can't bring back from your graveyard, or that you don't need anymore that you've already cast. So
Right.
3 of those and one thing that you're going to give an ability, but you're going to want to choose at least one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
A Splinter Fright is a elemental for 2 and a green, and it has trample. So its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, which is nice. Has trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. So he's going to help you get stuff into your graveyard, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to get big.
Yeah. And Nyx Weaver is a key card, I think, in this deck. You want to protect it if you can, because remember we talked about leaving your commander in your graveyard. This is how you're going to get it back.
Mm-hmm.
So Nyx Weaver is a 3 mana cost 2/3 with reach. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. So same as Soul or Splinter Fright. It's just going to get things into your graveyard. But you can then play 3 to exile this card and return target card from your graveyard to your hand.
Yeah.
So this is the card that you're going to try and protect until your commander's in your graveyard, and then you can exile it and bring your commander back to your hand and cast it again.
Yeah. Dead Bridge Chant for 4, a black and a green is an enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, put the top 10 cards of your library into your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose a card at random in your graveyard. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand.
Yeah.
They're going to want to get rid of this enchantment.
This is a great enchantment.
So good for you.
This is how you get them onto the battlefield
So
without paying their mana cost.
Yeah.
Crazy. Netherborn Altar for 2 is an artifact. You can tap it to put a soul counter on the altar, and then you can put your commander into your hand from the command zone. Then you lose life equal to each soul counter. So if by some chance someone decides not to destroy your commander and put it in your graveyard, and it's ended up on
in the command zone
being
again.
exiled or whatever, and it returns to your command zone, this is a way to get it back into your hand so you don't have to pay the commander tax.
Nice.
We don't like taxes.
Tanith Rex, which is a new dinosaur beast for 7 and 2 green, a big 11/11 huge guy, and he has trample. And it does have cycling for 1 and a green. So cycling means that you can discard this card and draw a different card. But when you cycle Tanith Rex, put a trample counter on target creature you control. So yeah, sure, you're going to put him in the graveyard for now. Make your other stuff have trample already. Nice.
Yeah. For
For
now. And then
now.
if you do other cycling, he gets bigger, right?
No, when
No, you get a trample
no
counter on
trample
target
counter,
creature.
but you have to
Give other
recycle
things
him.
trample.
Just him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to other cards on theme,
Mm-hmm.
win condition slash specialty cards slash other cool cards slash I don't know. This is just all the rest of the stuff. So as we said, a lot of this deck doesn't necessarily fit into the formula that we've talked about
Mm-hmm.
that's typical for Commander. So there's actually 10 cards recommended for like other cards on theme. And we kind of felt that there was about 19 that kind of could fit not in those categories, but maybe fit with the theme. That's okay because a lot of them have to do with your graveyard and dealing with your graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a key thing for this deck. The first one is Void Beckoner for 6 and 2 black. It is a death touch creature that's 8/8. It has cycling, so if you cycle it, then you get to take advantage of some card draw or put it into your graveyard instead of
Mm-hmm.
worrying about having to cast it for the 8/8, which is great. And then when you cycle it, you get to put a death touch counter on target creature you control.
Yeah.
So it's okay if you put it in your graveyard, you get a death touch counter on something, and then it's in your graveyard to get counters from your commander.
Exactly. Unbreakable Bond is a 4 and a black sorcery, and return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it. So you've
Mm-hmm.
just put Void Beckoner into the graveyard. You use Undesire or Unbreakable Bond and put it out there for 5 instead of the 8.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It's all about paying for things cheaper.
Yeah.
Slippery Bug Bonder, 3 and green. It's a 3/3. It has flash and hexproof. So you're going to play this on someone else's turn because it has flash. And when Slippery Bond or Bog Bonder enters the battlefield, you get to put a hexproof counter on a target creature. Then you move any number of counters from among creatures you control onto that creature. Any number. So this is a great card for this deck. It's right on theme. You've
Mm-hmm.
got all these counters on your creatures, and you can move them all to a creature that you want, and then just swing in with your amazing flyer lethal damage on someone.
Or
You're going to
protect
want to
something.
probably focus.
Yeah, you might use it to
Focus
protect
fire.
something too, like suddenly give something death touch or something like that. It would be
Yeah,
nice as
death
well.
touch or indestructible. It has hexproof, so it's great, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Give something hexproof all of a sudden when they're targeting it during combat or something.
Yeah. Well, it gets hexproof on it when it like you put
Oh,
something
right,
on.
yeah.
You put hexproof on that
On that
creature, and then you
creature.
get to move counters. Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
A Daring Fiend Bonder for 3 and a black, a 5/1 human warlock. So just a little flavor from the story of this is that normally people don't like beasts on Ikoria, and some people have special bonds with beasts. So it would be very difficult to live in a world like that. That's what Ikoria is. But this one
Hmm.
has haste, and during Feed Bonder's attacks, each combat. What? Oh, Daring Fiend Bonder. During. I was like, what? What does that mean? Daring Fiend Bonder attacks each combat if able. And for 1 and a black, you can exile this from your graveyard, and put an indestructible counter on target creature. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So you have to think about that ahead of time, but
Yeah.
it's pretty fun. 5/1 should have haste. Getting in there and dying.
So this next one has the weirdest creature I've ever seen in my entire life on it. Vitality Hunter, 3 and a white. It's a nightmare. Yes, it sure is a nightmare. It's like
Ah,
got 4 arms. It's like the bottom of
weird.
it is a horse, but
Weird.
I don't know. It's like a centaur with it's weird. When it becomes monstrous, you get to put a lifelink counter on each of up to X target creatures. So that's nice because you get to choose how many life counters you want to distribute. And monstrosity is X, so you get to choose how big
Mm-hmm.
you want to make this guy. It's 2 white and X. So I love that.
Yeah, it's going to be fairly strong because, yeah.
Yeah.
Avenging Hunt Bonder. Here's another Bonder, and it's for 3 and 2 white, a 3/3 with double strike. And whenever it attacks, put a double strike counter on another target attacking creature. Sweet.
Mm-hmm. Revelark is an elemental for 4 and a white. It has flying. When it enters the battlefield, you get to return up to 2 target creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now it is power 2 or less, so it's not going to be your big beefy things that you're going to be able to return.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to remember if you are tweaking this deck and you're leaving some of these cards in, that you don't want to get rid of all of your little guys
Yep.
for big guys. So you do need those little guys in there because you're going to make them bigger. Um, it has Evoke, which is 5 for 5 and a white, and basically it's an additional or an alternative cost. You can cast it for its Evoke cost, and if you do, it's sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. So basically, you can take advantage of the ability when it enters the battlefield and then put it to your graveyard because you wanted it in your graveyard so that you could give something flying.
Mm-hmm.
It's your choice.
Yeah. Solemn Recruit is a little 2/2 for 1 and 2 white, and it has double strike and revolt. So from our Aether Revolt Kaladesh time, at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, put a 1/1 counter on Solemn Recruit. So double strike with a 1/1 counter right away. It's a 3/3 double strike. That's really, really good for you.
Mm.
Not for them.
No. So Soul of Innistrad,
Yeah.
we love Innistrad
Mm-hmm.
for 4 and 2 black. So 6 mana cost, you get a 6/6, which is decent, on par for mana cost there. It
Mm-hmm.
is a Death Touch avatar. It has 2 abilities on it. Return up to 3 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand for 5, or exile Soul of Innistrad from your graveyard and return up to 3 target creatures from your graveyard to your hand. So basically, you get to do it twice. Once when it's on the battlefield, well, as many times as you want when
Yeah.
it's on the battlefield, I guess,
Yep.
until it dies. But then when
In
it's
the
in the
graveyard.
graveyard, you can then say, well, I'm going to get one last hurrah
Hurrah.
out of it. Exactly. Exile it and put it onto. We debated whether to put this in the high impact creatures,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's just too high a mana cost
It
to say
is.
that this is like a for sure.
Yeah, I have this card in my Teysa Death deck, and it is really hard to play. But once you do, they're in so much trouble.
Yeah,
So they want to get rid of it quickly, for sure.
yeah.
The Hornet Queen for 4 and 3 green, a 2/2 flying death touch insect, which is awesome. And when it enters the battlefield, put 4/1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch onto the battlefield.
Hmm.
It's the swarm is
Speaking
here.
of creatures that are 2 power that you can return
Yeah.
and has an enter the battlefield effect,
Mm-hmm.
so that's great. Another one is Aerial Responder. It's a 2/3 flying vigilance lifelink. So not only does it have awesome
Mm-hmm.
abilities that you can take from the graveyard, it is a 2/3 that you can return with the card that we were talking about earlier, and you can give it all kinds of other things. I love this card. It's one of my faves.
Yes, this is a really, really good card. Lesley used to kill me with that thing all the time. All the time. It was so strong. But then I brought out the Vampire Nighthawk for 1 and 2 black, a 2/3 flying death toucher with lifelink. I kill your aerial responder. But they're both in this deck, which makes it
Yeah.
even better.
Same team, Shawna. Same
Sweet.
team. Skullwinder is a it's a 1/3 snake for 3. It has Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, you can return target card from your graveyard to your hand,
Mm-hmm.
then choose an opponent, and that player returns a card from his or her graveyard to your hand. So we've talked a little bit about this in other videos, but Commander is very political. You decide who you're going to make friends with and who is going to be on your team. You can make deals. It's one of the reasons people like Commander so much.
Yep.
So this is a great card for that, as well as it can come back with other abilities and things like that.
Yep.
So
Ever After for 4 and 2 black. It's a sorcery that lets you return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Each of those creatures is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. And then you put Ever After on the bottom of your library, which is very
it
nice.
doesn't even go away. It's kind of great.
It's very great.
Yeah. Uh, Unburial Rites for 4 and a black. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Again, this is another graveyard to battlefield,
Mm-hmm.
not to your hand, so you
Very
don't have to
nice.
pay the mana cost for it. And it also has flashback. So flashback is an additional cost to it, or I guess it's an alternate cost that you pay later. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember. Anyways, it's 3 and a white, and you can cast this card from your graveyard for its flashback cost. So you're going to get to use that twice.
Yep.
And again, you're going to have big beefy things in the graveyard or your commander that you want to just put on the battlefield
Yep.
again.
So remember what we talked about with those great big high mana cost creatures. You don't want to pay full price for them. You're going to use
No.
cards like this to do that.
Yeah.
Mimic Vat for 3. It's an artifact that has imprint. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard. So, yeah. And then you can pay 3 and tap this and create a token that's a copy of a card exiled with Mimic Vat. It gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. So, yeah, you're going to exile one of your big guys and you're going to turn make a token of it. It's weird.
Yeah.
You're gonna have some fun with that
Token
too.
of it, it lasts only for 1 turn, but it has haste, so you
Yep.
can swing in with it and just keep going. So,
Do it over
yeah.
and over.
Yeah, it's okay if your creatures die with Mimic Vat. All right, so Swift Boots is the next one. This is a nice little equipment. It's equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and it's an equip for 1. So just a little protection there gives you some quick attacks. I guess it's important to remember that this is not a counter or anything
Right.
like that. It's just hexproof and haste, so you can't copy it. In some instances, you can copy it, some instances you can't. So read your cards carefully and figure out, is it the ability that you're doing? And does it have to be on the creature? All of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So
And then we have Together Forever, which is Lesley and I. Together Forever.
forever.
For 2 white, it is an enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, support 2. So that means you put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. And then, like I said, it's an enchantment, so it's sitting there, and you can pay 1 and choose target creature with a counter on it. When that creature dies this turn, return that card to its owner's hand. So it says a counter, so it doesn't necessarily mean have to be the +1 counters. And you can do this at instant speed. So your creature's going to die. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to choose that creature with a death touch counter on it. You can say, return it back to my hand. Sweet.
Yeah, it's great. And you'll have lots of counters. So Absan Ascendancy for all 3 Absan colors, white, black, green. It's an enchantment, and the beautiful thing about this one is we were just talking about counters. This one gives 1/1 counters. So when it enters the battlefield, you get to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. And then
Sweet.
whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you get to put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with
Yeah.
flying into the battlefield. So it gives you some little flyers when your creatures die, and it's okay if they die because they're going to be replaced.
Just such a cool link with this deck. It's amazing. All right, so then we're going
Mhm.
into the land, and we had mentioned previously how there's quite a bit of land in this deck. So normally the formula is about 32, and this one has 37. So we're going to talk about those here. We've got Nesting Grounds, which is a new one, I believe, and it is add
Mhm.
colorless mana, but you can pay 1 and tap it and move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent and activate this ability only when you can cast a sorcery. So there's where you can move those counters around a little bit, which is really handy.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and do all of
Sure. The
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 special ones?
special ones. Okay, so Gavany
Mhm.
Township, it's another one that's the colorless mana, but you can pay 2 a green and a white, and tap it and put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So it's really nice that way. Getting your guys bigger. Grim Backwoods, it's a colorless mana. Pay 2 a black and a green, and sacrifice a creature. Draw a card. So there's a little bit of card draw there, and triggering those death triggers. Blighted Woodland, colorless mana for 3 and a black. Sacrifice it and search your library for up to 2 basics. Put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. Memorial to Folly, this is one I use a lot in my decks that bring stuff back from the graveyard because you can use it to pay 2 and a black and sacrifice it to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand.
Mhm.
Canopy Vista. Oh, sorry. I'll let you do the duels.
Dual lands? Okay, perfect. I love all of those special abilities. I think as far as decks go, this is the one deck where your land is actually working as hard for you as any of the enchantments and
Mm-hmm.
other creatures and sorceries. So that's a really important thing to remember. As far as dual lands go, of course, in any deck, especially Commander, dual lands are going to be key for you
Mm.
being able to cast what you want. So we have one, two, three, four, five Celestia ones, Canopy Vista, Blossoming Stands, Sungrass Prairie, Crozan Verge, Celestia Sanctuary are green and white. As far as Golgari lands, there's only two, Jungle Hollow and Golgari Rot Farm. Those are our dual lands. Of course, each of these has a little bit of a special ability, or they tap for two, or they gain you a life,
Mm-hmm.
or they come in tapped unless you control stuff. So just read those. Scoured Barrens is our Orzhov colors, as well as Cave of Kolos and Orzhov Basilica. So those are our dual lands. Decent amount of dual lands in this deck. Some of them could
Mm-hmm.
definitely be upgraded with shock lands and things
Right.
like that, but those are our duals.
Yeah. Then we've got our commander type lands. So the command tower, which is just add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. He doesn't have to be out for
Mhm.
that to happen. Exotic Orchard is add 1 mana of any color that is a land an opponent controls can produce. And when you're playing 3 colors, that's usually something useful for you. Sandstep Citadel, it enters the battlefield tapped and add white, black, or green. And then we have the Myriad Landscape, which lets you sacrifice it and go looking for 2 basic land cards, and put it on the battlefield tapped, and then Evolving Wilds, which does the same except for just 1. Yeah.
This is the first one that we've seen with Evolving Wilds in it.
Yeah, that's true.
Normally we have to recommend that.
Yeah, that's true. And then it's got 7 plains, 7 swamp, and 4 forests, so a lot of plain lands in there too. Basic
All
lands, I should
right.
say.
So thank you for getting this far in our video and or podcast. Now is the time that all been waiting for with bated breath, which is our tweaks and suggestions for this deck.
Mm-hmm.
If we're just wanting to know how to play the game out of the box, you're definitely welcome to end there. But we'd love it if you stuck around till the end and listened to our tweaks, because we'd certainly like to know how you would tweak this deck. This deck is interesting to try and think of tweaks for, because it's really hard to tell what's going to be the important thing in this deck. Like, is it lifelink or death touch or indestructible?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're doing so many different things. So the first section that we thought might use some buffing up is the cycling.
Yeah.
There's one card, of course, the dinosaur thing that benefits from cycling cards, and then there's only one other card that is cycling. So of course, cycling allows you to draw cards, so that would help your draw
Yeah.
cards section and get things into your graveyard that you might want in your graveyard. So the first one that we found for a suggestion is Archfiend of
Yeah.
Ifnir for 3 and 2 black. It is a 5/4 flyer, so it has a second ability. When you cycle or discard another card, you get to put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control, and its cycle cost is 2. So if you just want it in the graveyard, you can just
Mm-hmm.
discard it, put it in the graveyard, draw a card. But if you do decide to keep it and you do decide to add a bunch of cycling stuff into this deck, then you can take advantage of the cycling stuff. So it's a great little addition if you want.
Yeah. Astral Drift for 2 and a white. It's an enchantment, and whenever you cycle Astral Drift or cycle another card, while Astral Drift is on the battlefield, you may exile target creature. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you can
Mm-hmm.
cycle it for 2 and a white as well. So again, that cycling thing happening there.
Yeah, well, in this one too, because you can exile a target creature and then return it to the
Mm-hmm.
battlefield, your commander you can then just bring into the battlefield several times, right?
Yep.
So Death Pulse, 2 and 2 black is an instant. Target creature gets -4/-4 till the end of
Mm-hmm.
turn. However, you can cycle it instead, and when you cycle it, you can still give a creature -1/-1 until the end of turn, which may or may not mean anything for you, but it gets you that
The
cycling
cycling.
ability,
Yep.
or is a removal. So there's some versatility there that might take advantage of
Yep.
your cycling.
The Dirge of Dread for 2 and a black. It's a sorcery, and all creatures gain fear until end of turn. So that means they can't be
Mhm.
blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures. So that's really handy. Or you
Mhm.
can, if you don't need it, you can cycle it for 1 and a black. And when you cycle it, you may have target creature gain fear until end of turn. So it depends on what you want to do there. If you need to do lots of them or just one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So another section that we thought, no, of course, of all of these tweaks, we don't expect you to take this deck completely apart
Yeah.
and put all of these things in there. These are just ones that we found that might be good. You're going to have to pick and choose how you
Mm-hmm.
want to tweak it. Of course, if you took everything out and put all of this stuff in, it would be a completely different deck. So please don't do that.
No.
But the first one that we found, because this doesn't have a lot of ramp or mana ramp in it, was Paradise Druid. It has hexproof as long as it's untapped, and you get to add 1 mana of any color. So it has the ability to tap for any color. It has hexproof already, and that will take advantage, of course, of some of the other cards that not necessarily give you counters, but that have hexproof because another card has hexproof. So.
Then the other another one is Questing Beast for 2 and a green. It's a really great upgrade. It has vigilance, deathtouch, and haste, so it's really handy when he first comes out. And it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, so it's a great against those token guys. And combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. And whenever Questing Beast deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls. So it's a
Mhm.
very, very strong card, and he would still be strong sitting in your graveyard in this deck.
Yeah, yeah. Luminous Broodmother, another one that will be strong in your graveyard or out.
Brood
Two
moth.
and two white. Yeah, Brood, yes. Is a 3/4 with flying. And when a creature you control without flying dies, you get to return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it. So it takes advantage of counters anyway. And if it didn't already have a flying counter on it, it returns to the battle with a flying counter on it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Then we have Grim Haruspex for 2 and a black. It's a 3/2 human wizard, but it has morph for 1 black. So you can cast this spell and have it sitting there as a 2/2 creature. And then when you're ready for it to become a creature, you have the 2 and a black, you can flip it over. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you can draw a card. So it's just a great little card draw because your stuff is going to die, and that's okay.
Yeah. Um, and then Ailey, Eternal Pilgrim
Mm-hmm.
for 2, which is a nice cheap card. For a 2/3, it has Death Touch,
Mm-hmm.
and you can pay 1 to sacrifice another creature and gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness, which is okay because sometimes you just want a creature to go to the graveyard, especially if it has an ability you want to copy. And then for 1 and 2, or 1 and a white and a black, you can sacrifice another creature and exile target non-land permanent. So it's some nice removal. You can only activate this ability only if you have at least 10 or more life in your 10, sorry, 10 life more than your starting total.
Yeah.
So it does require you to have some,
Lifelink. Yeah.
more than 40 life, but you do have a lot of lifelink possibility in this deck.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Then we've got some other cards that might help you with your graveyard shenanigans. So you can focus on returning things from to your hand from your graveyard. You can let your commander come in as well. So there's a bunch of cards that we thought might be good for that. The first one being Find and Finality. So we've talked about this card before. It's you choose between the two. So Find is you pay 2 black or green hybrid mana, return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, which is really cheap. Or you could even do the big board wipe here and the finality side for 4 and 2 black and a green. You can put 2 1/1 counters on a creature you control, and then everything else gets -4/-4 until end of turn. So it's a great way to get rid of some stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. Aid the Fallen, it's
Mm-hmm.
a cheap card for 1 and a black, and you get to choose 1 or both, so it gives you 2 different possibilities. You
Mm-hmm.
can return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or you can return target planeswalker card from your graveyard to your
Yep.
hand. So, again, just getting things out of the graveyard, and this one has the possibility to get your planeswalker if you have a Johnny in your graveyard.
Next, we have Gift of Immortality for 2 and a white. It is an enchantment aura. You enchant one of your creatures, and when it dies, you can return that card to the battlefield under your control. And then you can return Gift of Immortality to the battlefield attached to that creature at the beginning of the next end step. So you put it on your commander, and it just keeps coming back over and over and over and over again with
Yeah,
this enchantment on it. It's awesome.
such a great, awesome possibility for this deck. Archon of the Falling Stars for 4 and 2 white. It has flying, and when it dies, you may return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone does happen to exile that enchantment, hey, just return it to the
Yeah,
battlefield.
exactly. Dutiful Attendant for 2 and a black. It's a little 1/2 dude that I think you should return him fairly regularly because when he dies, return another target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So he's just going to be there and just doing his duty, letting you get stuff back. Doing his
Yep.
duty. Sorry.
Akuta, I don't know if he's acute or Akuta, but he's
He's
definitely
not
not
cute.
acute.
No.
He's not cute. Born of Ash, he has haste. He's a spirit, so haste is definitely a copyable ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have more cards in your hand than each opponent, you may sacrifice a swamp. If you do, you get to return this guy from your graveyard to play. So he's a creature that can be in your graveyard to copy abilities, and then you can return him. There's a way to return him to the battlefield. So
So strange. Bag of Holding for it's an artifact for 1, and whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. You can pay 2 and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. And then you can pay 4 and tap it and sacrifice the Bag of Holding and return all cards exiled with Bag of Holding to their owner's hand. So it's a great little way to just have a little card draw and a little side hand that you can play again later on. It's awesome.
And if you've used your cycling in this, then
Yeah,
those are discarding cards. So
definitely.
you can just cycle again.
Do it all again.
Blood Bones
Mm-hmm.
is a sorcery
Yep.
for 4, and as an additional cost to cast a spell, you do have to sacrifice a creature, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then return another creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So this I would say is almost a must add,
Yeah.
but we'll let you decide.
For sure, this is one of the very first cards that popped into my head. For
Yeah.
sure. Pyrexian Reclamation. It's for 1 black, it's an enchantment. And you can pay 1 in the black and pay 2 life and return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can do that at any time.
You love the flavor text on that. Death is no excuse to stop living.
I didn't notice that, but yeah.
Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord. So when we were talking about this, we kind of felt that the commander or the planeswalker they put in this deck was probably not the best planeswalker to put in this deck. I don't know why they didn't choose Sorin instead, but we feel that you should boot a Johnny and put Sorin in there. Um, Basically, as long as it's your turn, creatures and planeswalkers you control have lifelink. So that's a good thing. You can pay 2 and it deals 1 damage to target player or
Hmm.
planeswalker, which is kind of negligible. But his minus X ability is return target creature card with a converted mana cost of X from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a vampire in addition to his other types, which is, again, not irrelevant for this deck, but the fact that you're returning something from your graveyard to the battlefield on a regular basis, if you can get Sorin out there and just keep kind of pumping him up and
Hmm.
returning things back from your
Just sitting
graveyard,
there doing
he'll
damage.
be a really great little engine for this deck.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. And they might not necessarily have a lot of planeswalker removal, right?
yeah,
So planeswalkers are going to be pretty good, I think.
yeah.
Mortuary Mire. So that is a land that wasn't in this one. It's just a common, and it enters battlefield tap. But when it enters the battlefield, you may put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, and it adds black mana. So it's not just a colorless mana, which is nice too. And then I was thinking as we were talking about this whole cycling thing, any of the cycling lands might be good to have too. Just depends if you go with that more of that cycling. You might want to throw in some cycling lands as well that you don't necessarily need them. You can use them to draw cards and then
Yeah,
do other
I,
stuff.
I would definitely think the cycling lands are probably even better than better than cycling creatures because there is going to be a point where you don't need the lands on the battlefield to cast your creatures and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
might as well take advantage of when you discard things or when you cycle
yeah,
things. So
yeah.
yeah,
Just depends how
especially
this
since
deck
there's not a
works.
lot of card draw.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's how this deck works. Well, we did talk a little bit about proliferate because there are so many cards out there or cards in here that, of course, have counters. You're giving counters. Basically, what proliferate does is you choose any number of permanents and or players, then you give each another counter of each kind that they already have. So I kind of think that this deck should have at least a little bit of proliferate in it. Um, War of the Spark, of course, came out with some great ones. There's Blooming Hulk, which when it enters the battlefield, you can proliferate. There's Evolution Sage,
Mm,
which takes advantage of when land enters the
yeah,
battlefield, you can proliferate. And Pollen Bright Druid,
right.
basically, when it comes in, you can just choose to either put a counter on something or proliferate something. I would definitely choose proliferate. Um, there's lots of cards that you can find with proliferate on there. So that might be an additional kind of like if you don't want to go the cycling route and add more cycling stuff, you could say, well, let's add some proliferate stuff
Hmm.
because most of the proliferate stuff is in kind of the greenish colors. So
Yeah. And your commander is going to be getting counters too, right? Like the plus one counters too. So who knows? That
yeah.
might be something that really works well with this deck. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and even something like Spreading Sickness, which is a sorcery for 5, you can destroy target creature, then proliferate. So you can
Yeah.
take you have that removal that then proliferates your creatures.
Yeah.
So it has that dual purpose. So maybe you take a removal out and then add this card in. It's a little bit more expensive, but you get that kind of proliferate option.
Right.
So I kind of like that.
Yeah. So many cool things that you could potentially do with this deck. It depends which way you want to go and where you feel it needs more work, and it depends on your play group, right?
Yeah.
Who are you playing with? Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and I think that's the beauty of this deck is that it has so much potential for being a different game every time you play
Yeah.
it. It's not just going to be, all right, they're playing this deck again, or you're playing this deck again, and it just does the same thing over and over and over again. Like it's definitely going to be a different game every time you play it,
Mhm.
I think.
Mhm. For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Okay, well, that's it for this week, and thank you for watching and listening. We're available on YouTube and our podcasts wherever you like to download those. We're there, and feel free to connect with us on Facebook or Twitter, or YouTube, Instagram. We'd love to hear what you think, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And that's it for this time, and we'll see you next time. And in the meantime, tap those magic cards and have fun doing it. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.